In Nimzo Indian, we already mentioned some variation like A3, F3 in this position, and Queen C2, which is not probably the most popular, but good old variation and classical variations, and actually very important variations, start with the move E3. Now again, here there are many moves for black, such as C5, D5, castling, even knight E4 in this position. However, we want to stick with the move, with one of the moves, which is B6. And again, it's not because B6 is the best continuation in this position, not at all. It's because it's one of the playable variations, and it's easy to study it, and in my opinion gives black as good a play as they can get in any other variation of Nimzo Indian. So we went here B6, and obviously white has choices. They can go knight to E2, they can go knight to F3, and they can play bishop to D3. So we have to be prepared for those variations. Now, what we would do here is this. Suppose black plays knight E2. We go bishop A6, and we are attacking C4 pawn. And white has practically two continuations. Either go A3 or go knight G3. Now, what should white do here? And again, if white goes A3, we go bishop E7 or bishop takes C3. That's only two moves we have. Again, we could go bishop E7, but we don't want to. What I'm trying to do, I'm trying to give you my recommendation of easy way to learn how to play against Nimzo Indian. So the variation I suggest is bishop takes C3, knight takes C3, and now D5. So as you can see, we're trying to put pressure on C pawn. Now if white plays CD, then after bishop takes F1 and king takes F1 and knight takes D5, black has no problems at all. So what white should try to do, there is something going for white, they have to play B3. B3, when they play B3 in this position, they try to keep the center stable and try to play with two bishops in this position. So what I would recommend after B3, we could go castling or knight C6. We can go castling, and after bishop E2, D takes C, B takes C, and we go knight to C6, and after castling, knight to A5, putting pressure on the C4 pawn. So the best move for white in this position was A4, because now on knight A5 they can go knight B5. That's an indirect way to protect the pawn. And if black goes C6, then knight to A3. Now this position is also fine for black. They can simply go C5 here, and then later on you can either take CD or go rook C8. We have very satisfactory position. Now the other ways to play for white, the other way is knight G3 move. We're going to get to this position in a second. Well, in this position, when we played bishop A6, white can go knight G3. Now after knight G3, the best way to play for black is bishop takes C3. Notice we want to play D5. We cannot play D5 right away because queen A4 check. We lose the B4 bishop. So we play bishop takes c3, b takes c. Now we go d5, and after d5, white has the choices. White can play c takes d, but then we simply play bishop takes f1, and whichever way they take, we will go queen takes d5. And then we're going to go c5 and castle, and we have great position. So only way to play for white in this position after d5 is to go bishop a3. Try to stop black from castling and try to develop kingside attack. Then we play bishop takes c4, bishop takes c4, d takes c, and e4. Now, what happens if white simply plays queen a4 check and queen takes c4? Will they have an advantage simply because we cannot castle? No. On queen a4 check, we simply can go queen d7, and on queen takes c4, we go queen to c6. You see, now we're exchanging queens, and we're going to have very stable position. Well, queen b4 doesn't work if white wants to checkmate us, because we're going to go knight d5, attacking queen, stopping the checkmate, and playing queen takes c3 next move and winning the game. So queen takes c6, knight takes c6. This position is very well. This position is very safe for black. If white goes c4, we can simply go knight a5 or castle long, or even we could have done knight a5, rook c1. We just castle long, and then we play rook d7 and rook d8. White has no advantage at all. So this is one way we can play on knight g3. Again, you can find through the database some reference games with that, but what I'm doing here, and I'm giving you the guidance, what variation to choose against whatever system for black, where we can get easily playable position, not necessarily advantage of or some attack or something, but where you can learn quickly. Again, d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight c3, bishop b4, e3, and we go b6. Now, we just covered knight e2 move, but there is bishop d3 move. Bishop d3, we go bishop b7, attacking g2 pawn, and white has two continuations. Now, they can go knight f3, which will transpose to the main variation, which I'm saying, main variation could be like, they can start with knight f3, bishop b7, bishop d3, which is transposition. So, but only independent value has knight e2 move. And I used to play like this for white. And I remember I played against another American GM, Nick DeFermian, and when he played bishop takes g2, rook g1, bishop e4, that was the most popular way to play for black. And after a3, bishop takes c3, bishop, knight takes c3, bishop takes d3, queen takes d3. And then when white plays e4, white has maybe serious initiative. Well, I wouldn't recommend you to play like this for black. What I would recommend to do in this position is to take pawn on g2, but after rook g1 to play bishop to f3. Now, this position after bishop f3 simply not good for white. Well, rook takes g7 can be met with knight e4 with the idea of queen h4 or queen f6, white is experiencing serious problems, or even after knight h5 in queen h4. So bishop f3 is the answer. In this position, bishop f3 is a very strong move. So this is not a good way to play for white, knight e2. Now what would you do if white goes f3? Suppose white goes f3 and then they don't want to put knight on f3. They want to put knight on e2, but they don't want to give up g2 pawn, and they don't want to play f3 first. Remember, there is a rule. In Nimzo Indian, in all different variations, when they play f3, you hit them with c5. You do not allow white to establish powerful center. So we go c5, and immediately white has pawn structure problem. For instance, on knight e2, c takes d, e takes d. f3 does not make any sense because f3 has to be supporter of e4. And if we go c5, e4 is not possible. So that's what you do on f3 move. Well, then what's left here is knight f3 continuation. Knight f3 continuation, and black has two choices. We have choices to go knight e4, and after castle to play bishop takes c3, which is a very playable position for black and very sharp, but it's not my choice in this position. What on knight f3 I would do, I would simply castle, and when white castles, I would simply go c5. And here we have clear plan. What do we want to do? The clear plan is this. White's best move, for whatever reasons, we can explain you now for what reasons, is knight a4 in this position. Now, what black wants to do, black wants to play c takes d, e takes d, and d5. And later on to play dc and play position with isolated pawn in the center. So, for instance, if white goes bishop d2, we play c takes d, e takes d, and d5. This position, and if white plays c takes d, knight takes d5, this is like a typical position with isolated pawn, and after knight takes d5, bishop takes d2, white has no advantage. And this is typical position that I'm sure most of you, or maybe all of you, played from one on the other side for one. This position is equal, in my opinion, and something I would recommend you to play. So the one approach white has is bishop d2. Now, what happens if white plays a3? If white plays a3, I would play bishop takes c3, pawn takes c3, and now the move I like here is bishop e4. So we don't want to play knight c6 and allow e4. I'm very conscious of white getting big space advantage. We can go bishop e4, and later on maybe d5, or maybe even knight c6 and knight a5. a3 is not a good move, it's not popular move, and hardly was ever played. A knight a4 move. Now this has an idea of discomforting black's bishop on b4. On knight a4, best move is c takes d. Now after c takes d, white can play either e takes d or a3 first, which doesn't make much difference in a black's plan. Well, black on a3 goes bishop e7, ed, and here is not so much variations you have to study as you have to study the setup you want to play. We don't want to go d5 and allow c5, so we are going d6, and after rook e1, bishop to knight to d7, and if black goes b4, we go rook to e8, and then you put rook on c8 and play bishop to f8. This is very stable position for black. Now, what would you do next? For example, if white put bishop on b2, rook on c1, how can we play this position? We can go g6, we can go bishop g7, and we can look at for d5 at some points, and maybe even go knight h5 and knight f4, maybe playing queen f6. It's very difficult in this position to find constructive plan for white. White has all this position, and now where does he move? They don't have an attack on king's side. They cannot make much of a progress in the center. What can they do? If they go d5, either they may lose a pawn, or even if black goes e5, they could never make c5, and then maybe black goes knight h5 followed by f5. Black has at least equal chances in this position. It's very difficult to find something constructive for white in this position.